Universalist Church in Palatine, Illinois, in the suburbs west of Chicago. My supervising minister was named Rupert Lovely, and he was a member of the Prairie Group, a Unitarian Universalist ministry study group in the Midwest. So I found myself in the back seat of Rupert's car with an older retired minister on a long drive from the Chicago suburbs to a retreat center in St. Louis, where the ministers would gather for the Prairie Group meeting. Rupert and another minister were chatting in the front seat, and the older colleague and I were talking church. If ministers get together, they're almost always going to talk church. Our conversation meandered, as conversations do. We chatted a bit about the welcoming congregation process, which at that point was a fairly new thing. The older minister said something like, "I can affirm everyone except bisexuals." Then he shuddered. His contempt was physically manifested. I paused for a moment. The older minister had retired from being the lead minister for decades of one of the largest congregations in the Unitarian Universalist Association. A negative letter from him would almost certainly have swayed the Unitarian Universalist Association's Ministerial Fellowship Committee, the organization that certifies ministers to become Unitarian Universalist ministers, to be recognized as such. It almost certainly would have swayed them not to offer me fellowship as a clergy person. If he took offense at anything I said, he could sink my future career. So I barreled in. I asked him, "Why can't you affirm people who are bisexual?" He gave his reasons, and they included a lot of stereotypes. I told him that I knew openly bisexual people, and none of the people I knew were like the persons he described. Between us, we had something to discuss for the next 2 hours in the cramped back seat. I told him about people I knew at the seminary and the University of Chicago who defied his stereotypes. He did not take offense at our conversation, thankfully, and I hope that he learned something to broaden his outlook. Today I want to talk with you about something that is rarely talked about. It's the B in LGBT+, bisexuality. Our congregation is going through the process of recertifying for the welcoming congregation process. We are dedicating energy to understanding, advocating and making a place for lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgender people, and people of many other sexual or gender identities. We do this because we truly believe that all people have inherent worth and dignity. We extend our welcome in this congregation to LGBT+ people to be with us in spiritual community. We advocate for their human rights and well-being. What is bisexuality? Rather than using a dictionary definition, here's how Robin Ox, an activist and an educator, describes herself. She writes, "I call myself bisexual because I acknowledge in myself the potential to be attracted, romantically and/or sexually, to people of more than one gender, not necessarily at the same time in the same way or to the same degree." This seems to establish a working definition. The UA's website gives this: "The bisexual community today defines bisexuality as an attraction to people of one's own gender and people of other genders." There are similar terms. Someone who is pansexual is someone who is sexually or romantically attracted to people regardless of their sex or gender. It's a little bit confusing, To me, when I first heard the word pansexual, the first thought through my mind was the Greco-Roman deity, the one with the goat head and the goat legs. That wasn't what it was meant, though. Additionally, some transgender people take umbrage with the term bisexual because it seems to imply that only two genders exist. According to the Human Rights Campaign, the largest LGBT plus advocacy organization in the United States, while lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgender people make up about 10% of the American population, the Human Rights Campaign estimates that half that number are bisexuals. So who are they? Where are they? The 5% who are bisexual might be in plain sight. After all, we presume that same-sex couples are both gay and that opposite-sex couples are both straight, right? Maybe our preconceptions of people based upon their committed relationships obscures the truth, the reality that bisexuals can be in relationship with someone of either gender. One cannot assume someone's sexual orientation from their partner, who they are partnered with. Most people who identify as bi are probably in the closet. One of the reasons is that it is difficult for bisexual people to be public about their identity in both gay and straight communities. They don't necessarily find support from either groups. There are a lot of stereotypes about bisexual people, as I recounted from my conversation with the older minister. Things like they are unfaithful to their partners. They cannot be satisfied with relationships with only one person. They are afraid to give up their privilege of being straight. These stereotypes are heard in both gay and straight groups, with bisexuals being rejected by some in both groups. There's a belief that being bi is just a phase, or someone is confused. Life is a journey toward self-knowledge. When I became a Unitarian Universalist, I used to delve a little bit into different philosophical ideas and try to walk around with them for a while. For a period, I was a humanist, then a Buddhist, and then a Taoist. I was a neo-pagan for maybe 3 days. Sorry, I hope that it doesn't seem disparaging. That's just my own take on my identity. For some people, taking on the identity of being bi might be a part of a journey towards self-understanding. Many people who are bisexual find that identity through a process that might take time. For most who name themselves as bi folks, this seems to be the final identity and not a phase or confusion. There are even those who imagine that bi folks want to be another gender. I don't know where that comes from. There are some people who may feel that, but most seem to be content with the gender identity assigned at birth. Some gay people believe that bisexuals don't really exist, or they are only people transitioning from being straight to gay. Some people want those boxes to remain absolute, without ambiguity. To some, the idea that someone might be gay, but also be attracted to the opposite sex, is troubling. The same is true for some heterosexual people as well. Some want distinct camps and are hostile to those who do not conform to this mode. This situation causes some bi folks to stay closeted in one outward identity rather than endure hostility from some gay and some straight people. Yet human beings are not to be sorted out only into two groups with distinct boundaries. Alfred Kinsey was a researcher who studied human sexuality in the middle of the 20th century. He found that the people he interviewed for his research fell into a spectrum. He created 6 distinct categories, from totally heterosexual to totally homosexual. The words gay and straight weren't in use when he was writing. He found that 10% of the population was totally gay, and 10% of the population was totally straight. They combined to make up only 20% of Americans, in his estimation. His first public research was printed in 1948, and most of his subjects were younger people. In other words, they were your parents' or grandparents' generation. Other studies by other researchers over time had developed different ways of understanding human beings, like the Klein scale. It includes physical attraction, love, intimacy, and other factors. This points to a common misconception about bi people, that they are equally attracted to men and women. That is not the way it usually works. Bisexual people have attractions that can fit into different paths. I've known someone who was more attracted to men than to women, but could not seem to fall in love with a man. Bisexual people are not of one sort. During my years in the early 1990s at Meadville Lombard Theological School, a Unitarian Universalist seminary, when it was still affiliated with the University of Chicago, I encountered many people, including seminary classmates, who were bisexual. At the time, I probably knew more people who identified as bi than people who identified as gay or lesbian. It was quite an eye-opening experience and very different from living in Georgia and Tennessee. As someone new to Unitarian Universalism, my mode of being was not to imprint preconceptions about people and to experience them as they defined themselves and to affirm their individuality and their journeys. This was drawn from two of the principles of the Unitarian Universalist Association. In the search for one's own identity, one should also affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of others. In the Gospel according to Matthew, Jesus says, "In everything do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets." This is about treating other people as you might wish to be treated were you in their place. Affirming them as persons, being kind and friendly, even advocating for people who are different from oneself. The other principle that guided my thought was, when I met people who were different from myself, was affirming a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, which might be applied to a community learning from science, theology, and philosophy. But I also thought it might be about exploring ideas together. It might be a search for what in oneself is true and gives one meaning. Living in a Unitarian Universalist community means affirming and promoting those principles and also those who are seeking wholeness and know that we are doing the same. One of the traits of Unitarian Universalists, when we are at our best, is the ability to honor differences and not to assume that we know everything. Not to assume that we know everything. Another Unitarian Universalist trait is that we do not accept either-or thinking. My colleague in ministry, Amy Zucker Morgenstern, points out that Unitarian Universalists are resistant to either-or thinking. If Unitarian Universalists are standing in a room and are told to go to the left if they like chocolate ice cream, and go to the right if they like vanilla ice cream, she claims that while a few might go to one side or another, most of the Unitarian Universalists would be standing in the middle of the room, knowing that they liked or disliked chocolate and vanilla ice cream, unwilling to accept that they had to choose only one. This is true in Unitarian Universalist faith journeys. Some of us will find only one theological or philosophical tradition that speaks to who we are, and the truth that challenges us and inspires us at the same time. No other faith tradition does this in the way that we do. Many of us draw from more than one religious tradition. This does not mean that we are dilettantes or not challenged by the interplay and contradictions found in that mixture. We dance with both and probably have struggles when those ideas are in conflict. We don't have to be either or. The world makes boxes for you to fit in, categories to define what it means to be human. We are told we are this or that. Choose a side. Define yourself in a way that society has categories assigned to you. It's like binary code. There are ones and zeros, hot or cold. This is a false dichotomy. And when given only two choices, in my experience, most Unitarian Universalists will look for a third choice, even if it combines elements of both positions or options. This is kind of like what I imagine it is like to be a bisexual person. When given the either or, it seems that bisexual people think, in the words of Julia Shaw, I have long found myself wanting more. Indeed, this either or thinking fits some in the LGBT plus community, does not fit others in terms of sexuality or gender. Tomorrow is Celebrate Bisexuality Day. This date was chosen in part because Freddie Mercury, who was bisexual, was born in September. In 2021, Tom Wolfe, then governor of Pennsylvania, became the first American governor to acknowledge Bisexual Pride Day as September 23rd, tomorrow. Yes, it's got a different name, but the same idea. In a survey of bisexual people taken at a gathering they said that freedom was one of the greatest aspects of embracing their identity. One participant wrote, rather than being this or that, I am this and that. As we are traveling together through the welcoming congregation journey, there are so many things that might seem new to you. They are for me. 30 years ago, I was in a fairly progressive environment in Chicago. Despite that, had someone told me that there were more than two genders, I probably would have thought, how can that be? The things that we are learning now seem new, but they really probably aren't. The only thing is new about them is that we are at a time when some people can speak about themselves and live openly as the people they truly are. According to most surveys, Unitarian Universalists, 90% of us, grew up in some other religious tradition or no religious tradition at all. To the people we might have grown up with, our spiritual journey toward a faith community that is open to diversity might have been confusing. How can that be? They may have wondered. You might have wanted more. You might have also thought, I am this and that. As it might have been for each of us, so might it be for others. Let us be grateful to live in a time when people can live in truth. Let us be the kinds of people who advocate for those who are seeking, for those who are excluded, for those who want more. Let us be grateful that in this uncertain time, we may offer welcome and comfort to those who need it. In the name of all that is holy, so be it. Blessed be. Amen.